In the lead up to the elections, Joseph Desire Mobutu had remained in Brussels as head of the MNCL office at Lumumba's request. Now, he was back in the Congo, and Lumumba gave him the office of Secretary of State to the presidency, a key position. Antoine Gizenga was appointed Deputy Prime Minister. Justin Bomboko was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs. Anicet Kashamura, the co-founder of Syria, was appointed Minister of Information and Cultural Affairs. And Thomas Kanza was made UN Ambassador with ministerial status. Andre Blouin was appointed to Chief of Protocol in the cabinet. She remained a member of Lumumba's inner circle as she had been before the election, working closely with him. Some members of the press dubbed them Team Lumumba. From Accra, Nkrumah was monitoring developments and sending advice through his personal envoy in the Congo. Andrew Yaw, that is Andrew Yaw K. Jane, our names deal. Anyway, a businessman well known for his discretion. Nkrumah urged Lumumba to facilitate the election of Kasavubu as head of state on the grounds that the Bakongo people were too important to be thrust aside. Lumumba followed his advice. Joseph Leo was appointed president of the Senate. He was one of the politicians being passed money by Imbre. A sharp we followed record Imbre with contempt in one of the two interviews he gave in 2001. Was named Joseph Laho as aired by transcriber, who I think was demented. Senior figures in Washington were also watching closely. Although concerned about the election of Lumumba, they regarded the presidency of Elio as a good outcome. At a meeting of the National Security Council, Charles P. Cabell, an Air Force general who was deputy director of the CIA, mentioned briefly the fact of the election of Joseph Elio to the presidency of the Congo Senate. He expressed satisfaction at the influence of the CIA through the disbursement of funds to individuals such as Elio. He reminded those at the meeting that Elio was already under some degree of influence by the US. We may, he said, have secured some influence with this potentially useful individual. On 29 June 1960, King Baudouin arrived in the Congo for the ceremony of independence the following day. As he was driven from the airport, his entourage slowed down to allow him to stand up and salute the flag of an honor guard of the Force Publique by the side of the road. Suddenly, a smartly dressed man named Ambroise Boimbo, a former soldier proudly wearing his medals, ran out of the crowd, lining the roads, and snatched Baudouin's sword out of his scabbard. This was not intended as an act of personal aggression against Baudouin, but as a powerful symbol of the transfer of power. Wow. The German photojournalist Robert Lebeck, who was there at that moment, took a series of photographs to record the episode. Boimbo was wrestled to the ground by Belgian and Congolese gendarmes and thrown into a police jeep. He was apparently released the next day. The morning of 30th June 1960 in Leopoldville was cool and clear. Guns fired, a salute to proclaim freedom for the country's 14 million people. The ceremony of independence took place in the House of Parliament. the Palais de la Nation, which faced the Congo River with a view of Brazzaville on the opposite bank. In front of the building was a monument to Leopold II, which the Congolese attending the ceremony were obliged to pass on their way inside. Once inside, they had to pass a bronze bust of Leopold II. All were painful reminders of the Congo's history. Eve Blouin, Andre Blouin's daughter, who was then a child, remembers the day vividly. I climbed up the tamarind tree, shading our courtyard to witness the madness in the streets. Crowds of Belgians and Congolese had gathered to see the youthful King Baudouin the First, King Baudouin the First, who had come to the Congo for the occasion. From the highest branches, we could see the convoy of official black convertible cars following King Baudouin to the Saint Anne Cathedral or Saint Anne Cathedral for the Te Deum celebration before heading to the Palais de la Nation, where the official and solemn ceremony of independence will take place. She further recalls, the speakers in the streets of Leopoldville blasted the popular song Independence Cha-Cha, Independence Cha-Cha by Grand Kale and his African jazz band. Guests at Palais de la Nation included Ralph Bonche, who attended as the representatives of the United Nations, just as he had done at Independence of Ghana in Accra in 1957. There were delegations from the USSR and from the US. The American group was led by Bob Murphy, the foreign service officer who had been US ambassador to Belgium in 1949 to 1952. King Baudouin was wearing a sword which had been retrieved from Ambroise Boimbo. As he stood up to give a speech, a warm atmosphere of goodwill suffused the room, but it was instantly shattered by the king's tasteless remarks. The independence of the Congo, he declared, is formed by the outcome of the work conceived by King Leopold II's genius, undertaken by him with tenacious and continuous courage, with Belgium's perseverance. No, I don't want to read that. So this was an extraordinary claim. Today, observed the correspondence for the New York Times, who was present at the event. Barely half of the Congolese can read and write, and only 16 Congolese are university or college graduates. There are no Congolese doctors, lawyers, or engineers, and no African officers in the 25,000-man Congolese army. Baudouin concluded his speech in a deeply paternalistic tone. In quotes, "It is now up to you, gentlemen," he said to the Congolese in front of him, "to show that you are worthy of our confidence." Outside the Palais de la Nation, where thousands of people were following the speeches through loudspeakers, there was fury and hurt. The previous evening, Prime Minister Lumumba had accepted the maroon sash of the Order of the Crown, Belgium's highest decoration, which he was now wearing. But as he listened to Baudouin's speech, he became increasingly distressed. And as a photograph of the event shows, he furiously wrote down some notes. Baudouin's speech was followed by a diplomatic response from President Kasavubu. Then Lumumba, although he had not been included in the list of speakers, approached the microphone the day of 30th June 1960, asserted Lumumba, will be known for the glorious history of our struggle for liberty. No Congolese, he insisted, would ever forget the struggle in which we have not spared our strength, our privations, our sufferings, or our blood. It was a struggle, he went on, that was indispensable for putting an end to the humiliating slavery which had been imposed on us by force. He added that colonialism had left wounds too keen and too painful to be wiped from memory. Lumumba reminded members of the new parliament of the ironies, the insults, the blows that we had to submit to morning, noon, and night because we were Negroes. Lumumba drew attention to the United Nations Charter. He declared that the Congo must be made the rallying point of all Africa and that the nation must put an end to the oppression of free thought and give to all citizens the fundamental liberties guaranteed in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At a number of different moments throughout the speech, the Congolese in the hall broke into applause. The Soviet diplomats, noted the New York Times correspondents, seemed to be enjoying the occasion. Baldwin, however, was deeply upset. It looked as if he was going to walk out of the hall, but he was persuaded to stay. Bob Murphy noted that the veins in his forehead stood out as indication of the violence of his feelings. Murphy condemned Lumumba for delivering an inflammatory and bitter recital of all the wrongs, real and imaginary, committed in the past by Europeans in the Congo. A few years later, Malcolm X, at a founding rally of the Organization of Afro-American Unity in Manhattan in June 1964, told his listeners about Lumumba's Independence Day speech. You should take that speech and take it up over your door. You should take that speech and tack it up over your door. This is what Lumumba said. You ain't giving us anything. Why can't you take back these scars that you put on our bodies? Can you give us back the limbs that you cut off while you were here? In a radio broadcast in New York 5 months later, Malcolm X compared the Congo with America. He said, the basic cause of most of the trouble in the Congo right now is the intervention of outsiders. Fighting that is going on over the mineral wealth of the Congo and over the strategic position that the Congo represents on the African continent. And in order to justify it, they are doing it at the expense of the Congolese by trying to make it appear that the people are savages. And I think, as one of the gentlemen mentioned earlier, if there are savages in the Congo, then there are worse savages in Mississippi, Alabama, and New York, then, and New York City, and probably some in Washington, D.C. too. Lumumba, Malcolm X, believed, was the greatest black man who ever walked the African continent. The exuberance of independence in Ghana on 6th March 1957, 3 years before the independence of the Congo, had been unqualified. There was an overwhelming sense of happiness and hope for the future. Many in the crowds at the celebrations, including Ghana's guests, such as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., wept with joy. The transfer of power from Belgium to the Congo on 30th June 1960 was similarly unforgettable. dominant word, as recorded by the Congolese historian Undaiwel and Nziem, that's the name, was independence. Uhuru in Kiswahili, Kipwanza in Kikongo, and the Panda in Lingala. Women wore pagnes bearing the word independence, while the markets and public places reverberated with this magical word. All night long, people danced to the songs of freedom. Kabasele and African jazz had written a new song, Bilombe Bagane, Bilombe Bagane, which simply means the courageous have won. Such was the state of things yesterday. The black man knew poverty, forced labor, the whip. Wherever he said, his words met with a poor reception. Monkey, shut up. The lyrics echoed the speech given by Lumumba at the Palais de la Nation. So, but there was an edge of tension in the atmosphere. Dwayne's speech had introduced a sour taste or sour note. The tragic history of the former colony seemed to press down on the hopes of so many for the future. The American consul in Brazzaville, Alan W. Lukens, was a member of the U.S. delegation to Congo's independence celebration. I will never forget that day, he said, in a spirit of sympathy for the new nation. We were all sitting in the stands watching the parade, consisting of goose-stepping African soldiers led by Belgian, mostly Flemish, non-coms, non-commissioned officers, who were screaming at them as they went by in the parade. I said to my wife at that point, this is not going to last. They won't accept this. In the evening, Lumumba's friend, Luis Lopez Alvarez, went on a long walk in Brazzaville, near the rapids of the Congo River. In the distance, he could see the blue and green lights of Leopoldville reflected on the river. His heart was full of joy at the independence of our Congo, he wrote later, but he was seized with thousands of fears about the immediate future of his friend, Patrice. Knowing him alone and distraught among people who had come from all over the world, staying on the north bank of the river, he wrote with emotion, I witnessed the independence of our country, seriously thinking of the battle the next days would bring. The end of chapter 14. So we have chapter 15, which is going to be where we're going to take it next. My camera will pick it up if it's not seeing my face. Yeah, that's how it's going to pick it up. But if it's seeing my face, it's going to ignore it. So that's going to be our next. Can you pick that up? Alexa, pick that up. Now, my time, see, our time is so far gone as well. So I'm just going to possibly just give it a break, okay? So we will continue from chapter 15. Thank you so much for listening, okay? We won't take calls now because there's no point. We only have just about I think I only have just about 25 minutes to go if I have to take calls, right? So let's keep all the call takings till the evening time. So thank you once again for listening. Share it. And if you have been following it from the onset, right, from when we started reading, of course now, and if you haven't, okay, you should go back and you will see, just type White Malice on Mayegun's Diary Political, okay? You will see all the places where we have discussed this. I'm going to see you all later, Okay? And until then, Mokuna, stay safe and take it easy. Good afternoon.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Mayegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Mayegun ti dé o ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Lórí Facebook, lórí YouTube.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Gbogbo bó ṣe ń lọ ni Mayegun já wa sí.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Bó bá ṣe eré àní Mayegun máa wí.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Ó sì tún ṣe eré wàá gbọ́ níbẹ̀ o.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Mayegun Diary, Diary Politico.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Godfatherism kò sí lọ́rọ̀ Mayegun.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹgọ́rọ̀ lẹ́nu o.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Àní Mayegun làwa mọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Mayegun Diary, Mayegun number one.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé. Mayegun ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Lórí Facebook.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Lórí YouTube.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Ijó ìgbádìyẹ.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Prẹ̀sìdó bá rúfin o.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Kí gómìnà kówó jẹ.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Ọlọ́pàá tí ń darí bá.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Òpùrọ́ olóṣèlú.
Mayegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Mayegun ti dé.
Mayegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Mayegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o.
Mayegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Mayegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o, Mayegun ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀, Mayegun ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. Oníkan ṣáàtì ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, fáwọn ará ìlú tó gbé wọn débẹ̀ o.
Mayegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Mayegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní má ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Ha! Kì máa yí ṣeré, ẹ̀fẹ̀ kì máa ṣeré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣẹ̀fẹ̀ ẹni bá ti lè lẹ́bọ̀ lẹ́rù o ọmọ bá dèrò kàṣàyè tú wọn síta.
Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kí. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kí. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
tẹnitẹni ọmọ Máyégún ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni mo fọlọ́hún ṣọ́ ẹ̀ bá kìlẹ́bù lóòótọ́ olódodo ìlú ọ̀tá ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni ìwọ ṣá máa ń ṣọ́ra kò sì mọ́ bẹ̀rù bọ́tà ń lè rí bóníṣègùn lé káwọn mọ̀mọ́ fi ṣera wọn ni ó ti dẹrùn tí wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ sì mọ́ bẹ̀. èèpo ọ̀bọ̀lọmọ bá dérò tàjẹ́ ò gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ ó ti dọba lórí àbínú ẹni kò sì mọ́ fòyà àìsíwọ́lu ní ẹnìkẹ́ ìgbódì ẹyin lábàrá ó kó ẹni tó bá dán o.